When I woke up in the past, I had two priorities. First, I needed to make sure my fiancée, Sarah, ended up with her real love, David, and get them out of my life. Second, I was going to take every penny I had and move south to build something for myself. In my previous life, Sarah had taken pity on her old friend David. She secretly took the money I had spent 5 years saving up, the money for our wedding, and gave it to him so he could buy a house. Over 20 years later, David became a millionaire when that same property was bought out. I, on the other hand, was living in a run-down shack in a rural area, looking worn out and tired, spending my days caring for Sarah's disabled father and raising our 2 children. On the day I finally collapsed and died from exhaustion. Sarah was in the city, wearing a stylish suit and carrying flowers to attend David's 50th birthday party. And then, I woke up, and I was back. The employee dorms were noisy with activity. As I walked quickly toward my room, people I knew saw me and started to call out. "Mark, I saw Sarah downtown earlier. She was in the jewelry store, picking out a ring. It must be for the wedding, right? Sarah is so smart and pretty, and she has so much class. You're a lucky man to be marrying her." He's right. You just don't find a loyal, dedicated woman like her anymore. Loyal and dedicated? All of Sarah's loyalty was for David. For me, she just saw me as a convenience, someone she could call on for anything, who would handle her problems without a single complaint. After all, her convenient fiancé loved her, thought only of her, and followed her every instruction. With me around, she didn't have to lift a finger. I didn't respond to any of them. I just pushed my way through the people and went to my unit. I closed the door behind me and went straight to my bedroom, opening the old trunk I kept at the foot of my bed. Inside was the tin box I remembered. I reached in and pulled it open. The sight of the neatly stacked bills inside made me let out a long breath. Thank goodness. I wasn't too late. I took all the money out and counted it. It was all there, exactly $5,000. This was my entire savings from 5 years of working hard and living cheaply. In my past life, I had denied myself everything, saving every dollar, all while dreaming of marrying Sarah, starting a family, and living a good life. But what did Sarah do? She gave this money to David, her old flame, to buy a house. She was afraid I would find out, so she lied to me, telling me the money was stolen while she was out shopping for wedding supplies. I didn't question her at all. I just tried to comfort her, saying we could always make more money. Not long after, Sarah's father had an accident and fell down some stairs, breaking his leg. She told me he was sick and needed full-time care. I saw how stressed she was and immediately volunteered to quit my job and move back to her hometown to take care of him. The day I left, for the countryside, my position at the factory was given to David. While I was busy helping her father, she and David were in the city, acting like a couple. Later, when Sarah received a promotion and a transfer to a bigger city, she brought David with her. She never once thought about me, her husband. I spent half my life caring for my father-in-law and raising 2 kids. As I got close to 50, I thought things would finally get easier, only to find out that Sarah had been cheating on me with David the entire time. They had a whole separate life together. If David hadn't returned to sell that house and decided to tell me the truth, just to gloat, I would have died without ever knowing what she was really like. Knowing all that, I was not going to marry Sarah in this life. I was taking my money and leaving. I put the cash from the tin box into my pockets and left the dorm. If I was going to build a new life down south, the first thing I needed to do was check the train schedules. I started walking toward the station, but on the way I spotted Sarah and David walking together. Their arms were full of shopping bags, and they were just coming out of a department store. As soon as I saw them, I stepped into a small shop nearby to avoid being seen. To my annoyance, they followed me right in. Sarah was busy helping David pick things out. Her attention was completely on him, so she didn't even notice me. They were standing at a counter a little ways away from me. As they shopped, they started talking. David was putting on a sad face. "Sarah, if you get me Mark's job, is he going to be okay with that?" "My job? I thought I had quit my job after her father's accident. Was it possible that in my past life, Sarah had planned for me to quit all along, just so David could replace me?" My heart started to beat faster. I stared at Sarah. Her usual serious expression was gone, replaced by a soft smile, and her voice was gentle. "He'll have to be. Don't worry about it. I've already got a plan." In my last life, Sarah always spoke to me in a cold, all-business tone. I had just thought that was her personality. I never knew she could sound so warm. It just wasn't for me. Hearing her reassurance, David's face brightened. "Thank you, Sarah. You're really too good to me." "It's nothing," she said. At that, David's eyes darted around, and he put on a helpless expression. "Sarah, I'm new here, and I feel bad relying on you so much. If only we had our own place." The way he looked down, so pitiful and lost. Never mind Sarah, who clearly adored him. Most women would have found it hard to refuse. She comforted him softly. "Don't be in such a hurry. I'll figure something out for a house." "How? You're living in the dorms too?" Seeing how worried he looked, Sarah thought for a second before finally saying, "I've already made arrangements for a house. Mark's mother was a long-time employee at the factory. She passed away while working, so the management is offering Mark a 3-bedroom apartment at a big discount. He has the first right to it. I've decided that you should be the one to apply for it." David couldn't hide his surprise. "Really? But Mark probably won't agree to that, will he?" "He doesn't need to know," Sarah replied, not seeming to care. "But isn't that wrong?" David said, though his tone quickly changed. "It's just, Sarah, I'm new and I don't have any money. Even if you give me the chance to apply, I can't pay for it." Sarah completely believed his act. "Don't worry about it. I'll figure out the money. Just be patient. It will all be handled." David's face lit up. "Thank you, Sarah. You're the best. I'll never forget this." "There's no need for that between us," she said. They picked out a few items and left the store together, never even glancing in my direction. I couldn't believe Sarah would go this far for David. So, the cheap house David bought in my past life was actually the compensation the company owed me for my mother's death. It was supposed to be mine. And Sarah, without ever telling me, had planned to give it to David and even use the money I had saved for our wedding to pay for it. He used my money to buy my house. David got everything without spending a cent. How much did she love him? If they hadn't used me, I might have even felt impressed by their dedication. But standing there, only one thought came to mind. They were awful. I had been on my way to the train station to get a ticket, but after hearing Sarah's plan, I changed my mind. I went straight to the factory to see my supervisor. When I explained why I was there, my boss was confused. "You and Sarah are getting married soon, so we didn't want to bother you. We spoke to her about it directly. She said she would get the paperwork for you to sign and turn in. We've actually asked her about it a few times, but she hasn't brought the forms back yet." His words made me remember something. Around this time in my past life, Sarah had brought home a document for me to sign. Was that the paperwork for the house? In my past life, I trusted her completely and signed it without even reading it. That must have been how she did it. This time, I was going to beat her to it. I told my boss, "She's her own person, and I'm mine. This is the company's compensation for my mother. It can only go to me, her son. Sarah and I aren't married yet, so she's an outsider. She has no right to make this decision for me. I'll handle the housing application myself." My boss agreed that made sense. He gave me a new set of application forms. I filled them out right there, paid the $2,000 deposit and got the keys to the apartment. This time, if David and Sarah thought they were going to scheme their way into my apartment, they were wrong. I put the keys to my new place in my pocket, ate a large bowl of soup at a small food stand, and then walked back to the dorm. Sarah was already there. She was sitting in the small living area, looking annoyed. Ever since we had set our wedding date, I had given her a key to my dorm, and she had given me one to hers. Before, we lived separately, but now that David was here, Sarah was worried he didn't have a place to stay, so she gave him her dorm room. She had moved her things into the spare bedroom in my unit. Seeing me return so late, Sarah was obviously not happy. "Mark, where have you been? Why are you just getting back now?" she demanded. In the past, a single frown from her would have had me apologizing and trying to make it up to her. Today, I just answered, "I was out taking care of something." Sarah scoffed. "What could you possibly have to take care of?" I ignored her and walked into my room. Sarah was tall, attractive, and smart. She was an engineer at the factory. I had been completely in love with her, always trying to please her and doing anything she asked. She had never been ignored by me like this. My attitude left her stunned. Seeing me go into my room without saying anything else made her angry, and she followed me in. "Mark, what's gotten into you today? And by the way, where is all that money you saved?" "It's gone," I said. So she had already checked my money box while I was out. I looked at her and smiled coldly. "You went through my trunk? Sarah, what do you think you're doing, going through my personal things without asking?" I had always loved Sarah and gave her everything. She had gotten used to treating my money and my things as if they were her own. She never imagined I would actually confront her about it. Sarah's face turned red. "It's not, I just thought, since we're getting married, we need to buy things. And you saved up a lot, right? I was just going to borrow it for a little while." Ha, last time she used the same excuse to take my money for David. She was trying to do it again. The nerve. I said, "If you need to buy things for the wedding, use your own money. Why are you digging through my trunk? Are you planning on not paying for any part of your own wedding? You just want the man to pay for everything? Aren't you worried people will talk?" My tone and words made Sarah furious. No one had ever spoken to her like this. She yelled, "Mark, what is this attitude?" I stared at her. "What? Am I wrong? Who else in this factory gets married where the woman doesn't contribute at all? Why is it that for us it all has to be my money? What kind of person are you?" Humiliated, Sarah stormed out and slammed the door. I closed my door and looked around my room. It was a mess. Sarah must have torn it apart looking for the money. Thank God I had this second chance and got to it first. If not, I would have fallen for her trick all over again. Sarah didn't return that night, and I didn't care. I knew she was probably expecting me to come find her, to apologize and beg her to come back. After all, in my past life, I had never even raised my voice to her, let alone confronted her like this. Being challenged so directly was a shock to her pride. Storming out was her way of making me panic. She was probably waiting for me to come crawling back, just like I always did. But this time, she could keep waiting. I didn't care where Sarah spent the night. She was probably with David anyway. Sarah loved David. She would do anything for him. Now that I was stepping aside and letting them be together, she should be happy. She would probably be eager to be with him. But I was wrong. The next morning, Sarah came back by herself. She brought breakfast with her, buns, fried dough, and soy milk. She set the still warm food on the table. When I came out of the bathroom, she actually smiled at me. "Mark, time to eat." I might as well eat. I sat down and started eating. Sarah kept looking at me. I wasn't interested in talking to her, so I just ate. Seeing this, Sarah finally had to speak. "Mark, I was wrong yesterday. I'm sorry." Had the world turned upside down? I looked up at her, a skeptical look on my face. A flash of embarrassment crossed hers, but she kept going. "A coworker of mine had a family emergency and needed to borrow money, so I lent him everything I had saved for the wedding. That's why we have to use your money now." Huh. If I were the same old Mark from my past life, obsessed with Sarah, I would have believed her ridiculous lie without a second thought. But I wasn't that person anymore. I laughed to myself, knowing she was lying. Her goal was to get my money to buy a house for David. But Sarah wasn't the only one who could lie. I could too. I finished a bite, took a drink of soy milk, and put on a pained expression. I was in a bad mood yesterday, but I had a reason. My money was stolen when I was out shopping, so I was just— "What?" Sarah jumped up from her chair. The excuse I was using was the exact same one she had used on me in our last life. Back then, I chose to believe her. But this time, Sarah was staring at me, her eyes full of suspicion. She didn't believe me. But she didn't have a reason to doubt me either. I had always been obedient to her, treating her like she was perfect. Sarah couldn't imagine that I would lie to her. Without my money, she couldn't buy the house for David. Back then, a month's pay was just over $100. $2,000 was a lot of money, and she couldn't just borrow that much easily. Furious, Sarah stormed out and slammed the door again. I didn't care about her anger. After I finished breakfast, I went to the factory. Since I was planning to leave and start a business, I obviously didn't need this job. But I wasn't going to let Sarah and David get it. I decided to sell my position and get some extra cash. The factory was doing well, and many people were willing to pay for a good job. When I let it be known that I was giving up my spot, several people came to ask about the price. I wasn't asking for too much, and I quickly made a deal with one person. He wanted the job for his wife, but didn't have the cash with him. He needed to go home, talk to her, and borrow some money. We agreed on a time to meet, and I went back to my dorm feeling pretty good. I had just sat down and had a sip of water when David showed up. He came over specifically to taunt me, walking up with a smug look. "Mark, my friend, Sarah spent the whole day with me yesterday, helping me buy things. I didn't have any money, so she used her salary. She even said that since I'm new here and don't have anything, she'll give me half her pay from now on." David had said these same things to me in our last life. Back then, I had been furious, called him shameless, and gotten into a huge fight with Sarah. In the end, I gained nothing, and only made Sarah dislike me more. This time, David tried the same thing, but I didn't react. My eyes landed on David's clothes. The new outfit looked familiar. Weren't those the clothes I had bought for my own wedding? When did David take my clothes? Seeing that I was ignoring him and just looking at his clothes, David's expression became even more self-satisfied. Sarah knew I didn't bring many clothes, so she felt bad and gave me your new suit. Don't be mad. I looked at David. It's fine. I bought those clothes with my money. Sarah gave them to you without my permission. Taking something without asking is stealing. I'll just get the money for them from her. David laughed. Yeah, right. You think you have the nerve to ask Sarah for money? A guy like you is just lucky she's marrying you at all. Believe it or not, I could make her break up with you right now. She listens to you that much. Who do you think you are? I replied with a cold laugh. My question made David pause, and he looked flustered. You don't know who I am to her? If my parents hadn't forced me to get a girlfriend back then, I would have been with Sarah. You never would have had a chance. Is that right? So after your girlfriend broke up with you, you came running back to Sarah, hoping to start things up again? With no one else around, David wasn't afraid to admit it. That's right, it's exactly what you think. I couldn't help but laugh at his shamelessness. You two really are something else, aren't you? You want Sarah? You can have her. Now get out. Get away from me. You make me sick. David never expected me to react this way. He failed to get the angry reaction he wanted, so he just glared at me. "You just wait." "I'm waiting. You got dumped, so you came back to Sarah, treating her like your personal bank, right? You want her money, my job, and my house. If Sarah had nothing, would you still be acting so pathetic? Let me tell you, whatever you want to do is fine with me. Take Sarah. I don't want her. But my job, my money, and my house will never be yours." I had clearly hit a nerve. David looked like he was about to explode. Having failed to upset me, he turned to leave. But just as he turned, he saw someone walking into the courtyard and immediately changed his behavior. The anger on his face disappeared, and his eyes suddenly filled with tears. He covered his face and started to sob. "Mark, you've got it all wrong. Sarah and I are just like brother and sister. It's not what you think." He was putting on a victim act. I didn't even have to look to know that Sarah was back. Sure enough, Sarah appeared in the doorway. Seeing David like this, her heart melted. Without even asking what happened, she turned to me and yelled, "Mark, what did you do now?" "Mark said I'm just after your money. He said he won't give me the job or the house, and he's spreading rumors about us." David told Sarah everything I had been thinking. Hearing David mention the job and the house, Sarah's expression turned ugly. She had never planned to tell me about her scheme. Now that it was out in the open, she was completely humiliated. Her shame turned to anger, and she shrieked at me, "Mark, you've gone too far. Apologize to David." I already knew Sarah was cruel. I knew she had been using me. Even so, seeing her blindly defend David without a moment's hesitation still made my eyes sting. A lifetime of love, a lifetime of dedication, all for a woman like this. It wasn't worth it. My voice was choked with sadness for my past self's ignorance. Seeing my reaction, Sarah was surprised. She awkwardly told David to leave. After David left, she closed the door and sat down across from me. "Mark, let's talk." I wiped the moisture from my eyes and stared at her. For once, Sarah tried to explain. "Mark, there's nothing going on between David and me. We're just friends. I just feel sorry for him. You know his situation is sad. His girlfriend left him, and he has to raise a child by himself. I just want to help him." Huh. If I hadn't lived through my last life, I might have believed her. But her words were meaningless now. I just continued to stare at her. Sarah had never seen me like this. She hesitated, then reached for my hand. "Mark, I didn't mean to hide the housing situation from you. David doesn't have a place to live, and it doesn't look good for him to stay in my dorm. So I thought I'd get him a place to live first. That way you wouldn't be mad at me about him anymore." She made it sound so reasonable. But why should I give my house to David? I asked her. I'm not related to David at all. Why should I give him my house? Sarah was stuck. It took her a moment to reply. David and I grew up together. His parents were very good to me, so I have to repay him. If you want to repay him, you do it. Why are you dragging me into it? If I remember right, you've already given him a lot of money, right? And you promised to give him half your salary. Isn't that enough to repay him? It's not just about money, Mark. Can we please just help David this one time? Please? I'm begging you. No, I said, rejecting her. Not expecting me to be so firm, Sarah got angry. We're about to get married. A husband and wife are supposed to be a team. You have to listen to me. And if I don't? If you don't listen to me and give the house to David, then you can forget about marrying me. Sarah finally said the words she'd been holding back. In my last life, after my mother died, I had been incredibly dependent on Sarah. I saw her as my only hope. My biggest fear back then was Sarah threatening to break up with me. My biggest fear was her leaving me. That's why, even though I knew her relationship with David wasn't right, I just kept quiet and endured it. I always thought that if I was obedient enough and kind enough, Sarah would eventually see my devotion. She would feel bad for me and be good to me. But the Mark of that life never saw that day. He died on a cold, lonely night. The Mark of this life would not be so stupid. I stared at Sarah for a long moment, and then said slowly, "Fine, then we won't get married." Sarah hadn't expected me to say that. She stared at me, completely stunned. I looked at her. "Since we're not getting married, you don't need to live here anymore. Please get your things and leave, now." Sarah stared at me, dumbfounded, looking like her brain had just stopped working. I couldn't blame her for being shocked. The Mark she used to know would never have spoken to her like this, and he certainly would never have thrown her out. That Mark had given his entire life to her. Now that everything was out in the open, I didn't want to spend another second in the same apartment as this heartless woman. I gathered all of Sarah's belongings and threw them out into the hallway at her feet. The shocked look on Sarah's face turned to panic. When she realized I wasn't joking and was actually kicking her out, she grabbed her things and fled. After clearing the air with Sarah, given her pride, I thought that would be the end of it. But I underestimated Sarah's dedication to helping David. She was willing to do anything for him, including threatening and even framing me to get what she wanted. 3 days later, after I had bought my train ticket south, I was heading back to finalize the sale of my job when it happened. I ran into David in the courtyard. When he saw me, he charged at me, his eyes full of hatred. I didn't know what he was planning, but I instinctively moved to the side. He fell hard, hitting his head on the concrete. Blood started to pool around his head. Without thinking, I moved to help him up, but he grabbed my hand and bit down hard. The pain made me shove him away, and David fell to the ground again. He let out a terrible scream, yelling, "Mark's attacking me!" At his yell, Sarah came running. She grabbed my hand. "Mark, why did you hit him?" David screamed his accusations at me. Co-workers who were passing by ran over to see what was wrong. David kept insisting I had attacked him. No one else had been there when it happened. The way everyone was looking at me changed. David, in a high-pitched voice, demanded they call the police. I denied everything, of course. In the middle of the chaos, Sarah stopped David from calling the police. She said she would handle it and needed to talk to me. At that point, I pretty much understood their plan. Sure enough, the first thing Sarah said to me was, "There's an injured person, and there's evidence. You can't get out of this. The police will definitely arrest you." I just stared at her. She couldn't look me in the eye. She looked down and continued, "I can convince David not to press charges, and you won't get a criminal record for assault. But you need to show some good faith. Do one thing for me." Looking at Sarah, her head bowed, my heart went cold. I knew they were two awful, shameless people, but I never thought they'd go so far as to frame me like this. I had been too naive. I thought I could just walk away, but since they wanted something from me, they were never going to let me go. I cursed myself for being so careless. Sarah was willing to be an accomplice for David. At this point, I had no choice. I didn't want a criminal record. I didn't want the stress. I didn't want to be tangled up with these two terrible people anymore. My voice was hoarse. "You can forget about the house. I'd die before I give it to David. My mom died for that house." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Fine. You can keep the house. But your job has to go to David. Don't worry. We'll still get married. I'll support you from now on." She probably thought I was still desperate to marry her. Hearing her say that just made me feel sick. I couldn't stand to be near her. Thankfully, I no longer wanted to marry her. I no longer wanted to live that miserable life. Getting away from this toxic woman was my only priority. Weighing my options, I agreed. "Fine, the job is David's. Now you can go." When I agreed, Sarah wasn't as happy as I thought she'd be. She actually reached out to hug me. "Mark, I know you've been wronged in this. Don't worry. After we get married, I'll treat you well. I promise you won't have to suffer anymore." She probably thought she was some kind of saint. I fought back the urge to be sick and dodged her hug. I reminded her, "You can go now." Sarah didn't leave. She had the nerve to say she had nowhere to stay and moved back into my spare room. I knew she was up to no good. I knew she and David were both scum. To stop them from pulling another trick, I had to play along. Anyway, I had already bought my train ticket. In 5 days, I would be gone, and I would never have to see these disgusting people again. Sarah was like a different person. She wasn't acting so high and mighty anymore. She cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, trying to be nice to me. But now, I only felt disgust when I looked at her. Sarah brought me candy and cookies, asking about the details of our wedding. Maybe her conscience was bothering her. She stopped spending all her time with David and instead hovered around me. She didn't seem to mind when I was cold to her. She discussed the wedding reception with me, who to invite, and what suit I should wear. On the surface, she seemed to genuinely care about the wedding, but I felt nothing. I had suffered enough in my last life. I would never believe this woman could change. To all of Sarah's efforts, I had only one cold reply. "You handle it." These were the exact words Sarah had said to me in our last life when I was the one planning our wedding. I was just returning them to her. Sarah's expression was complicated, but she quickly put on a pleasant face and spoke to me again. "Mark, here's our marriage application. I've already signed it. Now it's just waiting for you. Once you sign, we can go get our marriage certificate today." I looked at Sarah's eager face and smirked. "Just leave it there. Our wedding is in 3 days. We can't wait any longer. It's best to get the certificate today." I didn't know why Sarah was in such a hurry to get married. To avoid any more trouble, I didn't want her to know my real plans. I said, "You go do your thing. I'll sign it and go get the certificate myself." I had been cold to her for days, so my sudden agreement was a pleasant surprise for Sarah. "Okay then, I'll go deliver the invitations. You sign it and we can go get the certificate together later." Sarah left happily, and I picked up the marriage application with a cold laugh. Just as I was about to rip it up and throw it away, David showed up again. Sarah hadn't gone to see David in days, and he couldn't get her to come, no matter how he tried. Sarah's change in attitude had upset David, so he took advantage of her being gone to come and provoke me. "Mark, even after all this, you're still clinging to Sarah? You have no shame, do you?" I gave him a humorless smile. "When it comes to being shameless, I still have a lot to learn from you. At least Sarah and I are technically engaged. You, on the other hand, are just a parasite, trying to be the other man." My words hit their mark, and David was furious. He looked at me with hatred. "You don't really think you've won, do you? Let me tell you, if you know what's good for you, you'll break off the engagement with Sarah right now. Otherwise, you'll regret it." "And if I don't?" "David, I know you want to attach yourself to Sarah. She's an engineer now, earning $100 more a month than a regular worker, with a bright future. You want to take my place, but why should I let you?" I stared at David with a cold smile and deliberately picked up the marriage application, waving it at him. David's face changed when he saw the application. A look of resentment flashed in his eyes. "Mark, Sarah doesn't even like you. Why would she marry you? She's only enduring this for me." "Is that so? If she likes you so much, why is she so determined to marry me?" "Why not you?" "That's because Sarah can't stand to see me suffer. I'll tell you what, the whole setup to frame you was her idea. She planned to give you my job all along. At first, she was going to use her father's illness to get you to quit, but you suddenly changed. She had no choice but to use me to frame you." David wasn't scared at all. He didn't take me seriously and told me everything. "Sarah only agreed to marry you for your house, your money, and your salary. If there was nothing in it for her, she wouldn't be doing this. She told me herself, she doesn't like you at all. She's just using you. After all, you're naive, obedient, and can't live without her." David thought I would be furious, that I would fly into a rage, but I just felt nothing. I already knew what kind of person Sarah was from my last life. I didn't need him to remind me. I ended David's provocation with a glass of water in his face. He left, soaked and swearing. With the noise gone, I picked up Sarah's marriage application and looked it over. I had planned to tear it up, but now I had a better idea. Since Sarah and David were so in love, I would do them a favor before I left. I picked up a pen and, under the other name, signed David. Then I took the marriage application and went straight to the registrar's office. A few minutes later, I had the marriage certificate. Looking at the names David and Sarah on it, I smiled. In this life, I wished Sarah and David a long and happy life together. May they never be parted. It was evening when Sarah returned. She had brought me some pastries. I was packing when she came in. Most of my things were already sold, so the apartment looked a little empty. Sarah noticed something was off. She looked around and tried to make small talk. "Mark, why does it feel like a lot of things are missing from the house?" I answered, "I threw out what I didn't need." "Then why are you packing a suitcase?" "I don't have a job anymore, so I can't live in this dorm. It has to be cleared out for other workers. I moved my things to the house my mom left me." I was telling the truth, so Sarah didn't suspect anything. She eagerly offered me the pastries she'd bought. I glanced at them, a cold smile on my lips. These pastries weren't what I liked. They were all David's favorite flavors. "So, Sarah, if you're going to pretend to be nice to me, at least do it right." I was annoyed and hadn't planned on saying anything, but I couldn't help myself. "These are all savory. I don't like savory pastries. I like sweet ones." A flicker of embarrassment crossed Sarah's face. I remembered wrong. Mark, it's my fault. I'll buy the ones you like next time." I didn't say anything and went back into my room. Seeing my cold attitude, a hurt expression flashed across Sarah's face. She brought up the marriage application. "Mark, did you sign the papers?" "Signed. I picked up the certificate, too." Sarah let out a sigh of relief. "The certificate? Let me see it." "There's nothing to see. I already packed it away at the bottom of a box. It's a hassle to dig it out again." Sarah seemed to believe me and went happily to prepare dinner. Dinner was a big meal, with fish and meat. Just as Sarah and I picked up our bowls, there was a frantic knock on the door. It was David's voice. "Sarah, I just threw up. I think I'm sick." I kept eating. Sarah put down her chopsticks and looked at me. She didn't rush out like she used to, but watched me carefully. "Mark, if you're worried, go check on him. Why don't we go together?" "Not me. I'm not a doctor. I'd just be in the way." Sarah hesitated. The knocking grew more frantic, and David's voice was now laced with tears. In the end, Sarah got up and left. "Mark, I'll just be a minute." I continued eating, unfazed. After dinner, I cleaned up, washed up, and went to bed. Sarah didn't come back that night. The next day, I calmly moved all my packed belongings to my new house. As I made several trips back and forth, I overheard people at the factory talking. They said David had been poisoned last night and had almost died. He was still in the hospital in critical condition. This hadn't happened in my last life, so I was a little curious. Why was he poisoned? Though curious, I didn't think about it for long. It had nothing to do with me. It took a full day to move everything. Sarah came back the next evening. I was sitting at the dining table eating dinner alone. I didn't even look up when she came in. She walked to the table and sat down. "He was poisoned. It was serious. David was scared to be alone, so I stayed at the hospital." I cut her off. "Can you not talk to me about other people's problems?" I don't care." Sarah was taken aback. After a moment, she asked, "Mark, are you angry?" "No, it's nothing to be angry about." Sarah wanted to say more, but I had already stood up, cleared my dishes, and headed for the kitchen. She stood in the middle of the room, her eyes dark as she watched me. I gave her no response and went straight to my bedroom. I was leaving tomorrow. I calmly washed up, lay down, and prepared to rest. There was a knock on the door. I snapped, "What is it?" "Mark, open the door. I have something for you." I opened the door. Sarah was standing there holding a small red box. She handed it to me, her face full of anticipation. "Open it." I opened it. It was a gold ring. I hadn't seen this ring in my last life, but I recognized its shape. It was in the shape of a plum blossom, delicate and beautiful. In my last life, when a wealthy David came back to sell his house, he had worn it on his finger. Back then, David looked like a prince, while I was a withered mess. David had held up his hand to show me the ring. "This is the wedding ring Sarah bought for me." I clearly remembered the suffocating anger and despair I felt then. So why was this ring in front of me now? I felt no joy, only disgust. I looked at Sarah and said, "What is this?" Sarah smiled and explained, "It's the wedding ring I bought for you. Try it on and see if it fits." I didn't try it on. I just closed the box. Seeing my cold attitude, Sarah's expression fell. I didn't want any more drama before I left, so I added, "Since it's a wedding ring, let's wait for the wedding to wear it. You have to respect the ceremony." Hearing this, Sarah's face instantly broke into a smile. "Okay then, I'll put it away, and I'll put it on you at the wedding tomorrow." The wedding. There would be no wedding for us. The wedding tomorrow would proceed as planned, but the groom wouldn't be me. It would be David. After all, David and Sarah were now legally husband and wife. And I knew David wouldn't let the wedding happen normally. While Sarah was busy helping him at the hospital, David had specifically called me. He told me he wouldn't let me and Sarah get married. Tomorrow's wedding wouldn't happen. He would do whatever it took to stop it. David thought his threat would bother me. I just said 3 words to him. "Do whatever." The night passed quickly. The next morning, David came looking for Sarah again. As usual, it was about him. Sarah was conflicted. "I have a wedding today." David dropped to his knees at the door. "Sarah, you're the one who told me to come here and rely on you. You promised to take care of me. Now I don't even know how long I have to live, and you're going to have a wedding? How can you do this to me?" David's wailing convinced Sarah to go. As she left with him, she looked back at me, standing coldly in the doorway. "Mark, I'll be right back. You wait. The wedding will happen as planned." I didn't say anything, just gave her a meaningful smile. Sarah thought I had agreed. As her and David's backs disappeared, I whispered, "Sarah, goodbye forever." I placed the marriage certificate for Sarah and David on the table. Then I picked up a pen and wrote a letter for Sarah. "I'm gone, Sarah. I wish you and David a long and happy life together." Putting down the pen and paper, I grabbed my luggage and headed straight for the train station. I got to the station an hour early and waited. The minutes ticked by. Finally, boarding began. I grabbed my luggage and joined the stream of people heading for the platform. I found my seat and let out a long breath. The mark of this life would no longer be someone else's pawn. I was going to find my own new life. The train whistle blew, and it slowly pulled out of the station. My gaze drifted out the window. Goodbye, the place where I lived for more than 20 years. As I was about to look away, I suddenly saw a familiar figure running frantically toward the train. Sarah. After arriving at the hospital, Sarah had been distracted. David was in the operating room, but Sarah had no desire to care. She just felt agitated. She remembered clearly that David had been recovering well when she left the hospital. The doctor had said it was nothing serious. Why had he suddenly gotten worse overnight? This shouldn't have happened. Her eyes were fixed on the operating room, lost in thought. A man came running down the corridor. It was Mr. Lee, an engineer Sarah had asked to help with the wedding preparations. Mr. Lee was panting. Sarah, something terrible has happened." Sarah's heart sank. She pulled her hand back from David and hurried toward Mr. Lee. "What happened? Is Mark angry?" "No, it's not that Mark's angry. It's... Mark, he's gone." "Gone?" Sarah thought she had misheard. "Where could Mark go? Where would he go? His mother is long dead. She was his only family now." Mr. Lee handed something to Sarah. "Look at this. Weren't you marrying Mark? How come the marriage certificate is with you and David, and Mark left you a suicide note?" Sarah snatched the certificate and the letter from Mr. Lee's hands. When she saw the names on the certificate, her eyes widened in fury. When she saw Mark's message, Sarah bolted and ran. Behind her, David's mournful cries echoed, but Sarah didn't look back. She had only one thought. She had to stop Mark. She had to stop Mark, no matter what. But by then, Mark had already begun his new life. 15 years later, after having fought my way to success in Silicon Valley, I returned to my hometown a wealthy man. Accompanied by my assistant, I came back to Riverton, the city where I'd lived for over 20 years, to scout for investments. After 15 years, Riverton had changed dramatically. The poverty and backwardness were gone. The old factory had closed down, and my former colleagues and acquaintances had scattered. As my assistant and I walked down the street, I looked at the city lights and felt a wave of emotion. I remembered myself in my 30s in my past life, toiling day and night in the countryside. The hardship was written on my face, my hands were rough and cracked, and I didn't have a single decent set of clothes. But now, I lived in a spacious, bright villa in Silicon Valley, drove a nice car, and ran my own company. I had married a woman who loved me, Lily, and we had a lively, adorable child. My in-laws treated me like their own son. My family life was happy and harmonious. All of this stemmed from the choice I made back then. Who could have imagined that two different choices would lead to such drastically different endings? Strolling through the streets of Riverton, I heard the call of a roasted chestnut vendor. I turned my head, and my assistant, already understanding, called out to the woman selling them. The middle-aged chestnut vendor was bundled in a thick cotton jacket, and one of her legs was lame. She greeted my assistant with a deferential smile. Her familiar Riverton accent felt warm. I struck up a conversation. "Ma'am, you've lived here for many years, haven't you?" "Yes, born and raised in Riverton. Been here almost 40 years now." The woman expertly weighed a bag of chestnuts, packaged them, and handed them over. When it was time to pay, the woman looked up at me. Our eyes met, and I saw shock and disbelief in hers. The bag of chestnuts she was handing me fell to the ground. Her voice rose, changing pitch. You're Mark?" I looked at the middle-aged woman, her face weathered by hardship, looking run down and burdened by life. "You know me? You are... I'm Sarah." Sarah. I stared at the woman in front of me, unable to connect this old, haggard, and disabled woman with the beautiful and poised Sarah I once knew. By my count, Sarah should be less than 40, but she looked like a woman of 60. Sarah's gaze was complicated as she looked at me, her lips moving. "Mark, why didn't you give me a chance? Do you know I looked for you for a long time?" I didn't understand why Sarah would look for me. She loved David so much. I had given them my blessing. Shouldn't she be happy? But Sarah's appearance clearly told a different story. In my past life, while Sarah wasn't a world beater, she had become the chief engineer at a Fortune 500 company, successful and proud. What happened in this life that she didn't go to the big city but stayed here, selling roasted chestnuts? Though Sarah and I were acquaintances, we had nothing to catch up on. Looking at me, Sarah was too ashamed to make small talk. The difference in our stations was humiliating for her. She pushed her chestnut cart and limped away. I had no intention of prying into her life. Sarah was just a passerby to me. I had already let it go. But the next day, at an investment meeting, I ran into the old factory manager. The manager looked at me with a sigh and brought up Sarah. Only then did I find out what Sarah had been through after I left. After discovering she was legally married to David, Sarah refused to accept it. She wanted to annul the marriage. But David wouldn't have it. To ruin my wedding with Sarah, he had poisoned himself. Unwilling to accept the failure of his plan, David had secretly increased the dose on the morning of our wedding. The result was that he spent days in the emergency room and was barely saved. But he was left completely incapacitated, a shell of a man. He had fully expected that after I left, Sarah would resign herself to fate, marry him, and take care of him. He never imagined Sarah would refuse. So David started making a huge scene, demanding Sarah take responsibility for him. Only then did Sarah see David's true colors. She refused to marry him, but David wouldn't let go. He spread rumors everywhere that Sarah had cheated on him, which was why I had left in a rage. He demanded she be responsible for him. David refused to grant a divorce, and Sarah refused to marry him. The once loving couple now loathed the sight of each other. David wouldn't back down, relentlessly harassing Sarah. Finally, under pressure from her father, Sarah gave in, planning to just make a life with David. Just as they were about to settle down, disaster struck. Sarah's father fell and broke his leg, just like in my previous life. David couldn't take care of him, so Sarah had to take leave from work to look after her father. With no income, they were living off savings, and life became increasingly difficult. David had only been interested in Sarah's status as an engineer for a better life. Now that Sarah had no salary due to taking too much leave, life was hard. And because she couldn't get to work on time, the factory management had complaints about her. Later, the factory's business declined, and they started laying people off. Sarah, the engineer who should have been the last to be cut, was laid off. David, who had gotten his job through the back door, was also let go. With no income, life was a struggle, and they had 2 disabled people at home. David, who had hoped to live well by relying on Sarah, was completely dumbfounded. He didn't want to be stuck with the now powerless Sarah, so he started demanding a divorce to remarry. Sarah hated David, blaming him for her downfall, so she dragged her feet, refusing to divorce him. Sarah couldn't abandon her paralyzed father, so she had to stay in the countryside to care for him, occasionally doing small jobs to make ends meet. She grew more and more haggard. Listening to the manager's story, and thinking of the weather-beaten face I saw last night, it was a living reflection of my past life. I couldn't help but laugh. What goes around comes around. Sooner or later, everyone gets what they deserve.